Hey, what's up, noobs? It's the Dead Noob. And today we're diving into a topic that gets tossed around more than fake news at CNN. Is gaming actually addictive? And more importantly, if it is, what you should look for and what you should be aware of. Well, we're breaking it down. And I'm going to go ahead and get into the topics that cover addictive gaming models and non-addictive models. So let's get into it. Reward loops designed to look like slot machines. Now, modern games, especially live service games, gacha titles, and mobile games, use variable ratio reinforcement, the same psychological mechanism that makes slot machines so addictive. You perform an action like kill, open a chest, complete a match, and the reward is unpredictable. That unpredictability is what spikes your dopamine. And developers layer this with flashy animations when you unlock something rare, sound cues that mimic casino win tones, color-coded rarity systems that usually train your brain to chase purple, gold, or red tier loot, seasonal FOMO mechanics that make rewards feel scarce and urgent. The result is a loop that feels exciting, fast, and hard to walk away from, especially for players who are reward sensitive or have an addictive personality. Modern games don't accidentally resemble casinos. They borrow directly from the same behavioral psychology labs that built the gaming industry. The core mechanism is the variable ratio reinforcement, the most powerful reward schedule ever discovered. Here's what makes it so potent. Unpredictability equals maximum dopamine. Your brain releases the strongest dopamine spikes when a reward might happen, but you don't know when, and you don't know how big it will be. This is why loot boxes, random drops, gacha pulls, and post-match reward screens feel so electric. They're engineered to hit the same neural circuitry as pulling a slot machine lever. Sensory overload. The casino aesthetic. Developers don't stop at randomness. They dress it up and amplify the hit. Visual cues, exploding particle effects, gold sparkles for rare items, the screen shakes, slow motion reveals, legendary color palettes, purple, gold, and red, audio cues, rising chimes, that jackpile style jingles, metallic clinks when loot drops, bass heavy thumps when you unlock something rare. These aren't cool effects, they're operant conditioning tools. Your brain learns this sound equals reward. Chase it. Your brain becomes conditioned to the pattern, even if you don't try to do it. Over time, players develop anticipation spikes before opening loot, compulsion loops, just one more match, just one more reward. I'm so close. Reward prediction errors. The brain overestimates the next reward. This is why bad rewards can keep you hooked. The loop itself becomes the reward. FOMO as a psychological weapon. Seasonal systems add a new layer, scarcity. Games intentionally create limited time skins, seasonal battle pass items, rotating shop inventories, event-exclusive cosmetics. This can trigger loss aversion. I don't want to miss this. Urgency. I only have 3 days left. Social pressure. Everyone else has it. Now I gotta get it. FOMO turns a want into a need. Layering systems equals maximum stickiness. The most addictive games stack multiple systems all at once. Random drops and variable ratio reinforcement. Flashy animations, sensory reward amplification. Seasonal exclusivity, FOMO, and loss aversion. Daily or weekly challenges, that's habit forming. Battle passes, that's a sunk cost fallacy. Social comparison, status anxiety. One system is compelling, but all of them together, that's a behavioral trap. And why this hits some players so hard. Certain players are more sensitive to reward loops. Players with high reward seeking tendencies, players who have ADHD, people under stress, younger players with developing impulse control. Anyone who uses games as escapism. For those groups, the loop isn't just fun, it's magnetic. Escalation and loss of control. Some players experience gaming in a way that mirrors compulsive behavior. This isn't about playing a lot. It's about losing the ability to stop. Common escalation signs include sessions stretching far beyond the intended time. One match becomes 4 more hours. Neglecting responsibilities like school, work, or relationships. Emotional withdrawal symptoms such as irritability, anxiety, or restlessness when not playing. Using gaming to escape negative emotions rather than for fun. These patterns resemble behavioral addictions like gambling or compulsive shopping. And critics argue that if the behavior and brain response look similar, well, the classification should too. When critics argue that gaming can resemble an addiction, this is the section they point to. Not the hours played, but the loss of agency. This is where gaming stops becoming a hobby and starts behaving like a compulsion. The core issue is impaired control. In behavioral psychology, addiction isn't defined by how long you play, how often you play, or how intense the game is. It's defined by whether you can stop when you intend to. For some players, that line gets blurry real fast. Time distortion and session escalation. Games are engineered to make time feel shorter than it is. But for vulnerable players, this becomes extreme. One more match, suddenly it's 3 a.m. 20-minute session, more like a 4-hour block. The intention to stop gets overridden by the loop. This isn't laziness, it's disassociation, a known psychological effect where attention narrows and time perception collapses. Games with fast match cycles, constant progression, no natural stopping points are especially good at triggering this. Functional impairment. Functional impairment. Life starts taking hits. This is the red flag psychologists look for. Players begin to skip meals, miss school or work, delay chores and responsibilities, withdraw from relationships, lose sleep consistently. It's not the amount of gaming, it's the cost of gaming. So when the game becomes a priority over basic needs, that's a hallmark of compulsive behavior. Emotional withdrawal symptoms. This is where the addiction model gets its strongest support. Some players experience irritability, anxiety, restlessness, mood swings, difficulty in focusing, even when they're not playing. These aren't chemical withdrawals like substances. They're psychological withdrawals. The brain is craving the dopamine hit, and it's used to getting it. This mirrors gambling addiction, compulsive shopping, social media addiction, more commonly called TikTok brain rot. The brain doesn't care that the stimulus is digital. It reacts the same way. Gaming is an emotional avoidance. This is the most subtle and the most dangerous escalation pattern. Players begin using gaming to avoid stress, numb sadness, escape conflict, distract from anxiety, or fill loneliness. Gaming becomes a coping mechanism instead of entertainment, and this creates the feedback loop. Life feels stressful. Players escape into gaming. Responsibilities pile up. Stress increases. Players escape even more. This is identical to the cycle seen in other behavioral addictions. The brain's reward system starts rewiring. Long-term compulsive gaming can shift the brain's reward priorities. Players may lose interest in hobbies, feel bored without constant stimulation, struggle with low dopamine tasks such as school, chores, or even work, crave the high-intensity feedback of gaming. This is called reward pathway sensitization, and it's one of the strongest arguments for the addiction model. And this is why critics say this looks like an addiction. When you compare the patterns side by side, we'll say the behavior of gaming compulsion and the behavior of gambling addiction. And they kind of check both boxes. So you have loss of control, escalation over time, withdrawal symptoms, using behavior to escape emotions, neglecting responsibilities, reward system dysregulation, and the overlap is hard to ignore. Critics argue if it walks like an addiction, it behaves like an addiction, well, why don't we classify it as one? And here's where the industry comes into play. Monetization incentives. Modern gaming economies thrive on engagement time. The longer you stay, the more likely you are to buy skins, buy battle passes, buy XP boosts, buy event-limited cosmetics. This creates a design incentive to keep players hooked. Daily login rewards, streak bonuses, limited time events, and battle pass progression bars that are engineered to create habit loops. The industry doesn't hide this. Executives openly talk about maximizing player retention. Critics argue that when profit depends on keeping players engaged at all costs, addiction-like design becomes a feature, not a bug. We'll go ahead and make some other points too, where high engagement is not necessarily congruent to addiction. Gaming is unique because it combines skill mastery, social interaction, narrative immersion, competition, and progression systems. This makes it more naturally engaging than passive entertainment. A person who plays 20 hours of a new RPG isn't necessarily addicted. They might just be passionate, invested, or enjoying a new release. Calling high engagement addiction risks pathologizing normal, healthy enthusiasm. One of the biggest flaws in the everything is an addiction argument is that it ignores what makes gaming fundamentally different from other forms of entertainment. Games aren't passive, they're interactive, skill-based, social, and cognitively demanding. That means high engagement is normal, not pathological. So let's unpack all of this with more depth and clarity. Games are built on mastery, not just stimulation. Unlike TV or scrolling on social media, games require learning systems, improving reflexes, developing strategies, overcoming challenges. This taps into competence, one of the 3 core psychological needs in self-determination theory. When players grind a new RPG or sink hours into a competitive shooter, it's because they're improving, they're invested, they're in a flow state, and that's not an addiction, that's skill pursuit. Social interaction is a legitimate motivation. Gaming is one of the most social hobbies on the planet. Gamers log in because, well, their friends are online, their guild has a raid, their team needs them, their community is active. If some players spend 20 hours in a new game with friends, that's not an addiction, that's social bonding. Calling that addictive is like calling weekly baseball games a disorder. Narrative immersion is not pathology. Books, movies, and TV shows get binged all the time. But nobody says, you read that 500-page novel in 2 days, you're addicted. You watched a whole season of a show this weekend? You need to seek help. But when a game delivers a gripping story, a rich world, an emotional investment, suddenly high engagement is suspicious. That's a double standard. Make it make sense. Competition naturally drives intensity. Competitive games trigger ambition, rivalry, the need to improve, teamwork, and a sense of pride. If someone practices a sport for 20 hours a week, we call them dedicated. If someone practices a competitive game for 20 hours, some people call them, addicted. The behavior is identical, only the medium changes. Progression systems are motivating, not automatically manipulative. Leveling up, unlocking gear, and completing quests are goal-oriented behaviors. Humans love progress, milestones, competition, growth. These are the same psychological drives behind learning an instrument, building a model kit, training at the gym. Progression is not congruent to addiction. Motivation is not congruent to addiction. And investment is not congruent to addiction. Passion looks intense from the outside. When someone is deeply into chess, painting, coding, fitness, or music production, they often spend dozens of hours a week on it. We call that passion, dedication, a flow, maybe even enthusiasm. But when the hobby is gaming, people jump straight to addiction. It's a problem, or we need to be concerned. This reveals more about society's bias than the player's behavior. Over-pathologizing normal behavior is dangerous. If every intense hobby is labeled addiction, then passion becomes a disorder, commitment becomes pathology, and enjoyment becomes suspicious. This dilutes the meaning of actual addiction and stigmatizes healthy engagement. Critics warn that if we call every enthusiastic gamer addicted, we stop being able to identify real cases of harm. Most players self-regulate. Despite fear-driven headlines, most gamers will stop when they're tired. They'll balance gaming with work, school, and relationships. They'll take breaks naturally. They don't spend recklessly and don't experience withdrawal-like symptoms. Billions of people play games worldwide. If gaming were inherently addictive, we'd see a global crisis instead of the vast majority treating gaming like any other hobby, fun, immersive, and manageable. Root causes often come from outside of gaming. Most causes labeled as gaming addiction are actually coping behaviors for deeper issues. For example, a teen with social anxiety may retreat into online games because they feel safer there. Someone dealing with depression may use gaming as a distraction from emotional pain. A person with an unstable home life may use gaming as a refuge. In these cases, gaming isn't the cause, it's the symptom. Removing gaming doesn't fix the underlying problem. It just removes the coping mechanism. This is why many psychologists argue that treating gaming as a root cause oversimplifies a complex situation. And now I'll transition into what to look for. And we'll go over some red flags. Behavioral red flags. Gaming consistently replaces basic needs like sleep, meals, or even hygiene. Repeated failure to meet responsibilities because of gaming. Lying about playtime or hiding gaming habits. Feeling guilt or shame about how much you play, but still unable to stop. Using gaming as the primary way to cope with stress, sadness, or loneliness. And then we have emotional red flags. Irritability or anxiety when unable to play. Feeling emptiness or restlessness when not gaming. Loss of interest in hobbies or activities outside of gaming. Emotional dependence on online interactions or in-game achievements. Some financial red flags. Impulse spending on microtransactions. Chasing rare items with repeated purchases. Buying cosmetics or loot boxes to relieve stress or boredom. Spending beyond your means on in-game content. There's some social red flags. Withdrawing from friends or family to game more. Replacing real-world relationships with online-only ones. Conflict at home due to gaming habits. Declining invitations or skipping events just to stay online. These signs don't automatically mean addiction, but they do mean to pay attention. Gaming should enhance your life, not consume it. Awareness is the difference between a healthy passion and an unhealthy dependence. This isn't about labeling yourself or anyone else. It's about recognition of patterns, especially the ones that creep in slowly. Think of it as a tactical situational awareness guide for your own habits. These are the clearest signs that gaming is starting to override your normal decision-making. Basic needs get replaced, so when gaming consistently pushes out sleep or meals, hygiene, or movement, it's a sign that the loop is taking priority over your body's baseline requirements. Responsibilities start slipping, not once in a while, but repeatedly. Missing work or school, ignoring chores, falling behind on deadlines, letting commitments slide. This is the same pattern seen in other compulsive behaviors. Hiding or minimizing playtime when you feel the need to lie about how long you've played or hide your receipts for microtransactions. You downplay how often you log in. That's a sign that you're aware something's off. Guilt without change. Feeling bad about your gaming habits but still unable to stop is a classic sign of impaired control. Gaming is a default coping mechanism. When gaming becomes the primary way to handle stress, sadness, loneliness, or conflict, it shifts from entertainment to emotional anesthesia. Emotional red flags. These are internal signals. The stuff you feel when the controller is not in your hands. Irritability or anxiety when you can't play. This isn't "I'm bored." It's a genuine emotional spike when access is blocked. Restlessness or emptiness when offline. Downtime feels uncomfortable unless you're gaming. That's a withdrawal-like response. Loss of interest in other activities. When hobbies you used to enjoy feel dull, slow, or unrewarding, it may mean your brain is recalibrating around high-intensity digital stimulation. Emotional dependence on in-game achievements. If your mood rises and falls based on rank, loot, wins and losses, social validation in-game, that's a sign the game is regulating your emotional state. And financial red flags. Money is one of the easiest ways to spot compulsive patterns. Impulsive spending on microtransactions, buying because you feel like you need to, not because you plan to, chasing rare drops with repeated purchases. This mirrors gambling behavior, especially when the reward is randomized. Spending to relieve stress. Using purchases to fix a mood is a major psychological red flag. Going beyond your budget. If gaming expenses start eating into savings, causing debt, or creating financial stress, it's a sign the behavior is overriding rational decision making. And social red flags. These show how gaming affects your relationships and your social ecosystem. Withdrawing from real-world connections, choosing the game over family, friends, or partners. Consistently, not occasionally. Replacing offline relationships with online-only ones. Online friendships are real, but if they replace all offline interaction, that's a shift worth noticing. Conflict at home over gaming. Arguments about time spent, responsibilities, money spent, emotional availability. Those are often early warning signs. Skipping events to stay online, declining invitations because you need to stay in game is a sign of narrowing priorities. And these signs don't automatically mean addiction, they mean pay attention. Gaming should enhance your life, give you joy, connect you with others, challenge you, help you grow. It shouldn't consume your identity, your time, or your well-being. Awareness is often the difference between a healthy passion and an unhealthy dependence. So is gaming addictive? Well, the truth is that it can be, but it's not by default. Games are powerful, engaging, sometimes manipulative, but they're also art, community, and escape. The key is knowing the signs, understanding the symptoms, and staying in control of your own play. So I'll close it out right here. Like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you think gaming addiction is real, or just media panic? All right, noobs, you know the deal. Be good, or be good at it.